Hello there, my beautiful and wonderful friends. Welcome back to another episode of TA with MK. My name is MK. In today's video, we're just going to give you a quick and brief market update. Quick and brief as far as, it relates to me. I know quick and brief for me is usually still at least 10 minutes, but we're going to try to stay on topic, just kind of give you guys some ideas on the shorter time frames of what we're seeing out of the S&P 500 based on, potentially the DXY, and then what Bitcoin looks like it could or could not do, plan A, plan B as always. And maybe what that would mean for your your favorite altcoins. So if that sounds interesting to you, please remember to like and subscribe, and let's go. It's TA with MK. It's TA with MK. Now, we are going to briefly talk about the DXY, but not as much as we normally do. This is more shorter time frame analysis, and I do believe the DXY governs more of your higher time frame analysis. One thing I just wanted to point out, just kind of briefly, is when you're looking at this entire uptrend that the DXY has been in this entire year, you notice that each time that it's had a pullback, that really hasn't had much more than about a 3.5% to 4% pullback. I think 5 might be the max before it's had a pretty significant bounce. And kind of look at all these different pullbacks that it's had. And in each case, it's been between, we'll just say 2 and 5%. Obviously, this one here is even a little bit smaller. A little over 2%. And in each case, it's been met with a pretty good sized bounce. You can see these bounces that have followed all these pullbacks. Right now, we're looking at, you can call this a bounce along the way here if you'd like, in which case this would have fit kind of the criteria of the rest. However, this was a pretty darn weak bounce. And right now, even from that bounce, we're down another almost 5%. Now, part of that is that there has been a change in behavior from the DXY. Clearly, we're in at least a short-term downtrend, which is good. Generally, when the DXY is going up, that's bad for stocks, and when it's going down, that's good. So the fact that we're finally put in this lower low, which is the first lower low we've put in this entire year, unless you want to count this one, maybe as kind of a lower low than this one here, but that one's pretty close. It still kind of fell within this zone of support. This one, to me, that we're currently working on is the first, in my opinion, at least confirmed lower low. You would still expect, even in this, potential downtrend, well, not potential, but this short-term downtrend that could potentially turn into a longer-term downtrend, which would be good for stocks and, of course, crypto to follow, you would expect some sort of a bounce. I'm not saying that it should be any mega bounce, but you would expect at some point sooner than later a bounce to the upside. So I just want to, start or preface the rest of the analysis based on the fact that we do have room for a little bit more of a downside move, in my opinion, down here to test this 200 moving average, maybe even a wick down here as low as about 104. But, plan A and plan B is going to be very much prefaced on the fact that, to me, there's more risk once we get over to traditional stocks and Bitcoin to the upside than there is to the downside, just because I think a bounce from the DXY is inevitably sooner than later, in my opinion. Okay, dokie. So now we're over here on the daily chart for the S&P 500. This is actually the E-mini futures chart. I use this Monday through Friday just because it trades 24/7. Now, I do know the DXY analysis was a little bit sporadic and kind of all over the place, but I just wanted to start out with that just so you kind of understood that the higher time frames would suggest that the upside is more risky than the downside. And even on something like the S1 of the S&P 500, which very, very much does drive Bitcoin. Now, we did mention in some of our previous videos that the FTX situation, the exchange that more or less collapsed, did, of course, put a little black swan in crypto, and while the S&P 500 and traditional markets were still moving to the upside, Bitcoin decoupled briefly and, of course, went to the downside. But I do not believe that to be something that's going to remain permanent. I think it's going to be something that, more or less is already done. Now, granted, anytime crypto has something like that happen, it is going to briefly decouple. Regardless of what the traditional markets are doing, it's probably going to dump. Just because crypto is such a high risk asset. There's assets that have risk, and then there's Bitcoin and especially altcoins, right, that are high risk. So anytime there's negative news or something like what happened with the FTX, it's going to move crypto down regardless of what the rest of the market's doing. But that being said, outside of something like that happening again in the next 24 hours or even the next few days, I do believe that we can still use the S&P 500 to kind of more or less find clues as to what Bitcoin is likely to do and altcoins to follow. So with that out of the way, one thing we want to pay attention to here on the S&P 500, we've talked about this on a lot of our recent videos, is you have this trend line up here that has been resistance ever since our top at the beginning of the year. It actually was the end of last year. No, it was the beginning of this year. On 1, 2, 3, and 4 occasions, you also have this horizontal line of support and resistance, as well as the 200 EMA and SMA all coming together more or less at the point where price action was just rejected here a couple of days ago on the 15th. So when you're thinking short-term ideas, really to me, that in some ways could be a much larger time frame rejection. That means over the next week or so, we may just see some, move down here somewhere. However, we want to first observe the key levels of support that we have right in front of us, which if I just clear some of this up really, really fast, in fact, let's just get everything back off that we added. Price action more or less is in this kind of rising wedge, if you want to call it. We don't really know. This has only had 2 touches, so I don't know that you would call this support line very strong. However, if price action works its way down to this area that was previously resistance, support, resistance, clearly it is a zone of significance. Do we see a bounce there, and some sort of a move back up here to test this, zone, as we kind of fell just short of it here? Do we see that in the next, day or two? That's a possibility. That would be very much a plan A, which once we get to Bitcoin, I'll kind of explain what to look for as far as those price levels are concerned. However, if we lose this level, and then bearish retest it, you got to look at that as confluence between not only this trend line of, somewhat support, but very much this horizontal line of support. If we lose that, then you can just take a simple measured move of this rising wedge. And at that point, you're looking for price action. This could take a few weeks to play out, but very, very much likely to go back down somewhere between about 3,500 and maybe this zone of support here. On the daily, which is around 3650 on the high end, down to 3600. Now we're going to talk, that's plan B. We're going to talk a little bit about what we would expect out of Bitcoin once we hop over to that chart. But again, really for bigger upside moves, which to me is where to be honest with you, I would love to see crypto, I would love to see traditional stocks, go on a little bit of a sustained rally to the upside, just because we could get in some amazing, long trades for crypto, I do believe. But what we really would need to see is a break of this 200 SMA, which is the yellow moving average on my chart here, a retest of this zone of support, which would mean it'd be flipping not only the 200, which you can see was resistance here. We got above it here, but we have not been above it. It was resistance here as well. We have not been above it since April. So that's clearly been resistance for quite some time, along with all these other levels of resistance. That would be a significant flip should it happen. And then, we could start talking some pretty good upside targets for the S&P 500, Bitcoin to follow. But you have to understand that right now, as we have all this confluence of resistance, that naturally I'm going to be more biased to the downside just because that's what TA is telling me. So let's hop over and check out Bitcoin. All right, now we're over here on the Bitcoin 4-hour chart on Binance, and we're just going to keep this super short and sweet, as we've already kind of looked at the S&P 500. Plan A, plan B for me, at least as far as tonight's price action goes, going into tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be much more important, as tomorrow is Friday, at least here in the United States, and that will be going into the weekend for the S&P 500. So short-term time frames, really all I'm looking for is a break of this, we'll call it the mid zone, which is around 17,250. Clearly that's been the area that's been acting as resistance recently. We've had a rejection back here on the 11th. We had a rejection here on the 14th. And we had a rejection here recently, just a couple days ago on the 15th. So we need to see at least a 4-hour candle body close above that area. So a break followed by a little bit of a retest. At that point, plan A would be price action for Bitcoin's likely headed back up here to test 18,000, and as high is probably 18,500, which would have some confluence as these moving averages, the 200 SMA and 200 EMA would be right there acting as resistance. So that would be your upside move ideas, assuming that we see another rejection at this area of around 17,200 to 17,250. At that point, you would expect us to head back down. We'd be looking for a higher low down here at about 16,500, but if that area is lost, expect us to go back to the bottom of the range. Targets down around 15,850 and high is 16,150. Now, I'll keep you guys posted tomorrow. I don't honestly expect a break to the downside of this range, over the next 24 hours. So I'm not really going to talk about the targets that are down below here. I have spoke about those in a recent video if you want to look back. You know, targets between 12,000 and, you know, the upper side of 14,000. Those are valid if we break 15,850. It's just not something I'm expecting in the, you know, in the short term, so we won't really discuss that in today's video. And even on the upside, you know, if we break above 17,250, I think that our max upside in the next 24 hours is probably, you know, 19K, and I don't even think we quite reached that. I think 18,500. So we'll circle back tomorrow, but keep an eye on those key price levels. Thank you guys as always for stopping by. I appreciate your support as always. And on your way out, if you're enjoying the content, do me a huge favor. Remember to like and subscribe. We'll catch you tomorrow. It's